So I'm Mary Mehmet. I'm a volunteer with Transition Framingham, which helped organize this event. And Transition Framingham has been active in Framingham since 2012, working to go from fossil fuel dependence to local resilience. Just a couple of housekeeping things. This meeting is being recorded, and please hold your questions until Q&A following the presentation. And then when we have the Q&A, we'll have you come up to the microphone. We're not that big a group, so we hope that we get everybody's questions. I was going to tell the same story I told at the last one, but I'm going to change it, because does anyone need interpretation? Anyone need Spanish or Portuguese? We are ready. Okay, really quick story. I was at the community garden that I have a plot in last week, and we had our opening day. I didn't get to do any of my own planting, sad. Because I was, the community was getting organized. Community gardens have such a place in my heart. We're doing this organizing, the Boy Scouts are helping, everyone's doing what they can for their own plots, and we have an older gentleman who really can't rototill because he had a triple bypass. The woman next to him is like, oh, I'll help, she rototills like his plot. But then at the end, she comes to me and says, yeah, I'll help him all year. I just can't quite finish it because I had neck surgery a couple weeks ago. So I've got the heart surgery and the neck surgery, and they're all helping each other. I'm not promising that's what happens in all community gardens all the time, but that's kind of the magic. That's what goes on. So beautiful vegetables and beautiful things happening with people. That's what we're hoping for. And we're so, so grateful for everyone who's made this project possible, including the Community Preservation Committee and the CPA Act. We want to bring that kind of community feel to all over Framingham. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to do my thank yous. We want to thank Planning and Community Development, including the Director Sarkis. He's not here today, but he's been super helpful. Parks and Recreation, including the Director, James Snyder. Again, they've been our co-applicant and really helpful in this process. The Agriculture Advisory Committee. We have at least one member here today. We're so grateful for their support. The CPC, anyone show up from CPC? Community Preservation Committee, if you, again, volunteers in your community who serve in this commission, we're so grateful for their help. And we're hugely thankful to ATAC for sponsoring us today, so thank you again to them. Right. So I would also like to welcome up to the mic Leslie White-Harvey, the City Council person for this district. Would you like to say a few words? Come on up.
Take it out. Hi everyone, I'm Leslie White-Harvey. I'm District Council for District 8, which is right here in the neighborhood. So I'm really happy we're having this event here. So the first time we met at the other gardens, one of the main words I want us to keep in mind is community. And this garden is open to all of us, those who have been here the entire lifetime and the new ones to come even tomorrow that are not born here today. So I want us to think of the community gardens in that manner. One of the things I would like to discuss is when we do these community gardens, to think about honoring the Native American land, that it's a Native American land that we're using, and ways we can honor it even before we build it, and have someone come and bless the land, and in way of basically respecting the land. I have a few words to add to that. So I've spoken to Dr. Denise Pruitt from Mass Bay, who's also known as Ladybug in the Nipmuc tribe, and she works at Mass Bay. I'll read part of the Mass Bay's Indigenous People acknowledgement. Mass Bay Community College wishes to acknowledge that Wellesley, Framingham, and Ashland campus sit on the land that European colonists appropriated from the Nipmuc, Massachusetts, and Putnam tribes. Massachusetts cannot change the past, but what we can do is honor the land, the ancestors, the indigenous traditions, and we at Mass Bay use this sacred land as a communal land to nurture learners to move forward and for more inclusive world. Mass Bay College unveiled a permanent land acknowledgement plaque in a ceremony attended by chiefs of 3 native tribes last year, 2 years ago, September 14th, 2022. Mass Bay is believed to be the first community college in Massachusetts to make a public acknowledgement with a permanent marker and ceremony of reconciliation and healing. During the ceremony, the college announced an Indigenous Peoples Scholarship had been formed for current and past mass-based students, for which fundraising has begun. So they have a more extensive proclamation, but I would like us to do something like that and to at least have a plaque or some sort of acknowledgement. So moving forward, I would love to be a part of this initiative. I'll contact Dr. Pruitt, I think P-R-I-U-T-T, at Mass Bay and connect us all together, and she's willing to do some prayer and kind of really lead us and guide us as to how we acknowledge the land. So thank you for the opportunity to speak, and excited for this opportunity for our district. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So lastly, I'm going to introduce Ray from RDLA, our landscape designer, architect, and they're going to show you what they came up with from the last meetings. We're going to go through Bates Park first, and then Roosevelt Park, and there'll be ample time for questions and answers. And let Ray step up. Come on there.
There we go. I think now I have to move it up again. Let's see. I'm a little taller. So welcome. This is one of the coolest community meetings I've ever been to in this space. Usually we're in like city halls and town halls, and it's so nice to be in a creative space like this to talk about creative ideas. Today, as Mary mentioned, I'll do a quick project overview, where we have been, where we're headed. We'll review some of the feedback that we received in the first community meeting. We'll talk about our concepts for Bates Road Park, and then we'll open it up for discussion. Following that, we'll delve into the concepts at Roosevelt Park. Once again, have discussion, then we'll have a final Q&A. The boards for Bates Road Park are over here. When we're finished with that, we'll flip them over, go to Roosevelt. So we started this project in the beginning of the year. We met with the working group from the city and Transitions Framingham. In February, we collected a lot of data for both sites, did a very thorough site analysis, which I'll show you in a few seconds. And then our first community meeting was at each site. We survived the windy days and the chill in the air, but we got some very good feedback, and we've incorporated that feedback into the concepts I'll be showing you. We have been developing the conceptual designs in April. We're here to present them to you today in May. In June, we'll synthesize all your comments into final concepts for each park, and then in July, we'll present our final report. So we had very good attendance at our first community meeting. We needed folks to hold on to the boards because they were going to blow away. But that, if you're interested in seeing what the concepts and what we discussed, I believe that's on the Community Cable Access TV channel. And we presented a site analysis for each park, Bates Road on this side, Roosevelt Park over there. We looked at a series of different factors, solar orientation, shade, topography, entrances into each park, other park elements and programming, where water lines were located, and some sensitive environmental buffers that we have to contend with in our design. We also gave folks the opportunity to comment on where they would like to see the garden. In each concept, they're on opposite sides of the park. At Bates Road, we have one to the west and one to the east. At Roosevelt, same thing. And our concepts show which ones the community had preferences for. Wrong way. After the presentations, we gave folks the opportunity to vote for what they wanted to see in each community garden, and you can see, keep wanting to hit the laser. Edging was not super popular, but storage sheds were. So you can really, and here this shows the counts of that voting system. And Transitions Framingham also handed out a paper survey after each meeting, and this was the results of those calculations. And you can see that raised garden beds were very popular for both. We'd like to get your feedback on how many you think we need, but we have included those in the concepts: composting, rain barrels, information boards. Tool shed was more popular at Bates than it was at Roosevelt, but I believe that most of our concepts include all of these things. It's just a matter of how much weighted impact they have on the designs. So as I mentioned, first I'm going to talk about the Bates Road Park concepts. In our I'm going to move this out a little bit because I feel like I'm twisting my back. In our first meeting and the feedback that we received, the western side of the property seemed to be more favorable with the community. You can see here that Bates Road is right here. We have a ball field, a playground, a shelter, an old basketball court, a set of swings here. This first concept, we're calling Concept Design A, shows there was some sentiment to keep the existing swing set, and this shows the impacts of doing that. You can see here, this is the flood, the 1% chance of flooding line as a flood hazard, where we have a little bit in the garden there as we push it back. Zooming in a little bit closer, you can see that we're accessing the garden from Bates Road, an opening in the timber fence with a gate, 6-foot wide path to the garden. The garden is approximately 42 by 54 feet long. This is the existing swing set. This is an aerial picture, so it's a little bit off from where you see it in the picture. But as you can see, the swing set has some issues, which I'll talk about in a second. The safety zone is literally half of what it's supposed to be. So we need to make sure that the walkway is outside of that safety zone. We have a paved area for deliveries here. They will have to be wheelbarrowed into the garden. The garden will be enclosed by a steel picket fence and surrounded. Here we have we had some discussion about issues with foul balls from the baseball field. So we're including like a safety netting on this side to prevent that from entering the garden. Here are existing bleachers, the backstop, and we're trying to thread the needle through these two existing trees. And I think that's it. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer now just to talk about the elements of the garden. Oh, no, first, talk about the swing set. So these wood chips here are for safety surfacing. Per code, they really need to be much larger. So the diagram here is what's in the Certified Playground Safety Handbook. So it's the height of the structure, and the safety zone is 2 times the height. So it's quite an extensive safety zone. And what we're talking about is bringing the walk-in outside of that safety zone. You'll see that there's also a lack of an accessible path to the swings. There is an opening here, but grass is not considered accessible. So we would have to make another opening here for our garden. This is a little bit closer view of what we're proposing. We had mentioned that the overwhelming response was for raised beds. So we, in this particular scheme, we're showing 16 raised beds. And those are partially accessible. And we have 2 accessible raised beds that are fully accessible. Hose bibs for watering and irrigation. We have an ADA accessible picnic table. There was some desire for a central compost area, which we're showing here, and then 5 in-ground plots in the rear. A storage shed for tools would be located in the back corner, and rain barrels. The city, we probably can get the city to bring a water line in for the irrigation. And when I say irrigation, it will be a place to connect a hose. There'll be a box here, a backflow preventer, which prevents any water from the hoses to get back into the potable water system, which is any kind of irrigation or for athletic fields or gardens needs to have that as part of the plumbing code. And then we've incorporated an information sign which can be used for the neighborhood. I want to point out that I am going to show you 2 concepts. The feedback that I prefer that we don't choose A or B, but you tell us which one, what you like about A, what you like about B, then we'll synthesize those ideas into a final design. Concept B, in the same western location here, but this one raises the idea of actually removing or relocating that swing to the playground area, where all the kids are located. The benefit of this scheme is that it's a shorter distance from the road, less expense to get a water line out there, and also gives you the possibility to expand the garden further in the future. So zooming in a little bit more, basically a square, 52-foot square area for gardening. This one has more in-ground plots and less raised beds. Getting your feedback, we may want to be half and half, but this just shows you a very different approach. There's an 8-foot walk, or 8-foot access, which could be used for maintenance as well, which is about 20 feet from the road. You can see here, this is where the existing swing is located. The 1% flood hazard zone is out of this bed completely. We've got our property line along this end, the existing timber guardrail, and the ball field here. We can consider putting the safety netting along this side because it is a little bit vulnerable from foul balls as well. But we can take a look at that. So once again, picnic table, accessible picnic table, 3 raised beds, which are fully accessible, 24 in-ground plots, steel picket fence. And this one, we have the compost area located towards the back of the garden, which we'd love to get your feedback on where you would like to see that. So with that, those are the two schemes. I can, okay, actually, it's already been done. We have Concept A and Concept B located adjacent to each other, and we would love to hear from you all your feedback.
So does this microphone work? Oh, it works great. Excellent. So yes, this opens up the Q&A portion for Bates. Not only do we have the side-by-sides there and here, but you have one of each on your tables. We would like all questions to be asked from the microphone for the purposes of everybody being able to hear as well as the video recording. So I invite anybody that has questions about either of these concepts or pieces of either of these concepts to come up here and ask your questions. Anybody want to be the first one? Diane, come on up. I'm not going to make everyone get up, but it would be nice if people could actually have their individual questions.
We don't have the
verbatim for the
Wi-Fi
video.
mic that we can walk around.
It's good exercise, right? And if you don't want to get up, I will be happy to repeat the question.
I'm curious about the surface between the paths between the beds, if you imagine gravel or wood chips, or what are you thinking?
What we're thinking is like a stabilized stone dust, which is like granite chips, but it has a binder so that it doesn't spread all over the place, and it's low maintenance and it's permeable. So we don't have to worry about, there is a drainage problem currently. We noticed last meeting in this area over here. This surfacing will allow water to seep through the surfacing into the water table. So it's accessible, it's ADA accessible, it's level.
And I'm thinking about if you're doing that kind of a surface, how you maintain it when you have in-ground beds that don't have a wall like a raised bed.
They would have an edge.
Oh, they would have an edge.
Yeah, they would have an edge. It just wasn't a popular vote, but there needs to be an edging there somehow.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay.
Next question. Brigitte, come on up.
Hi, I have a question about you said about the steel picket fence. This sounds a little bit like jail. Because, don't we have like deers and stuff? So it needs to be pretty high. Do you know a little bit how this would look?
We haven't gotten to that level of detail, but we did hear at the last meeting that there's issues with groundhogs and deer.
Yeah.
We don't want it to be high. We want it to be 4 feet. But we'll have to figure out the deer issue.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned the last meeting, my father used to have a 10-foot high deer fence, and they still got in. So.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So
Maybe
yeah, just that it looks nice and serves the purpose.
Yeah, and I think the steel picket fence is definitely a step up over chain link. And what we would like to do for future grants is to get everything into the budget as much as we can, because if we don't get the money, we're going to have to cut back. Now's the time, what we call for blue sky thinking. We have a blue sky today. Get as much in there that we want to get.
Yeah.
The netting for the ball field may be something that we can adapt for the deer.
Yeah.
And you can pull it up and pull it down. It's like a curtain.
Yeah.
So-
And another thing is my idea. I would say the thing with the outdated swing set is not strong enough to get for the other solution, because I think the solution with the small pathway is much better. Concept B, design B has much more positive things like concept A. And the swing set, I don't think the swing set is important enough because there's a big playground on the other side. So that's my opinion about that.
Yeah, we did hear in the last meeting someone saying that they wanted to keep the swing set. So ultimately, it's a democratic society, and we can go whichever way the community wants to go.
I have a follow-up question about the
Sure.
fence. You said you didn't want it to be more than 4 feet tall. Is that for aesthetic purposes or cost reasons, both? Other ideas why you wouldn't want it more than 4 feet?
Aesthetic, mostly.
Okay. Because like obviously 4 feet is not anywhere near close to keep deer out, right?
No, I know. We're going to have to, like I said, we can look at that safety netting,
Sure.
but really, it's not a huge area, so you don't want to feel, I think somebody mentioned, you don't want to feel like you're in jail.
Right.
So it's a fine balance. Maybe there could be an outer fence layer or something like that that's taller.
Okay.
But for a garden this small, a more, it's the scale is more appropriate for something, 5 feet maybe, but
Okay.
but like something, or we could look at going taller. We'd have to draw some sections to see how it feels to be in there.
Got it. Perfect. Other questions? Ooh, come on up, Tracy.
So my question is, one has like 16 raised beds, one has like 3. What's the benefits to the in-ground versus the raised?
The benefits, the in-ground are larger,
Okay.
and so you have a lot more real estate to garden. And the one thing I didn't point out is we had a comment that it would be nice to have a variety size of gardens. Maybe somebody doesn't want a big garden, they just want a small garden. These are larger gardens over here. These can be divided into 4 garden spaces. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, rather than one big one. So somebody could take this whole area, or they could just take a quarter of that area and have a little plot to garden. The accessible raised beds are only 4 feet by 8 feet. So they're designed to, these are actually a little bit larger. They're designed to just lean over and garden. But if you were in a wheelchair, they can only be, 3 feet high. So these are the accessible ones here. So there's a little bit of a wall. The other, one of the other benefits of the raised beds is we can completely import, fresh planting soil, and it's deeper than going in ground. So I think Allison told me that it has to be deeper than carrots. So the in-grounds would have to be, the soil would have to be removed, and we'd probably put in like a geotextile fabric in the bottom of it, and then put new soil in, maybe a couple feet.
Right, because I was going to ask, what's the quality of the soil anyway?
We're thinking bringing in all new soil, so it will be, it won't have
Fresh and clean.
lead and arsenic and, who knows what was here. We'll probably, this is just for a feasibility study at this point, but once it goes into design, we would have the soil tested.
And then the compost bin, or whatever it is, that's right by the picnic table, are there benefits to that? I mean, you could throw your scraps right in, but would it cause more, like, bugs and stuff near the picnic table?
Yeah, it depends on somebody from the transition Framingham could probably answer that better than I. We show an option where it's in the back.
Yeah.
And if we have a strong feeling one way or the other, we can move it out of the center and put it in the back. Like I said, you don't need to select
One or the
scheme, right? Just tell me what you like. Like, are there, are 16 raised beds too many? Would you like to see more in-ground plots, or are there too many in-ground plots? As an example of what we would like to get out of this, so that we can capture all of your input into a final scheme.
So my last question is, so to do the raised bed plots, would that be cheaper than, I mean, more raised bed and fewer in-ground? Would that be less expensive than the in-ground because you have to dig up all the soil of the in-ground?
Honestly, it might be, but I don't want finances to hang us up.
Okay.
Like, if there's a strong preference for raised beds, let's do it, and we'll estimate it and put a 20% contingency on top of that so we can get funding. So I'm not worried about
Okay.
the expense at this point.
And those green circles, what's that?
These?
Yeah.
Those are existing trees that are there right now.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Yep.
So I have a quick follow-up on the compost. So I do think that there's like functional benefits to having it be in the middle in that like it's probably closer for everybody. But I think in terms of like sightly, how attractive it is or whatever, personally, I think having the compost area in the corner is probably best for like the aesthetics of the garden as opposed to having it like right in the middle next to the picnic table. Personal suggestion, preference.
That's what I want to hear.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Did I
Anybody
see
else
Sam about to pop up? Or another question here? Somebody? Yeah, come on up. I'm not sure if I know your name. What's your name? Wes. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. So I just wanted to mirror that about the compost, but I do like the design of it being in the middle, like just for accessibility, but probably would be best to be like in the corner. Same with the shed, like it could be better in the middle, but like aesthetics. For the beds, I like the idea of the larger beds being divided, but they could be larger and raised, just as an idea, if that's an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I like a mix of both of them, like
Yeah.
not all raised, not all in ground.
50-50.
A little bit, yeah, 50-50.
Yeah, that's
and
good.
okay.
Just one comment on the storage shed. We didn't want to affect the sight lines into the garden for public safety personnel from the road.
Mm-hmm.
So we put it, I suppose somebody could still hide behind, outside of the garden. But I hear your point. The other consideration to think about, not to throw a wrench in anything, but putting the compost area in the back, it's a long way for the folks in wheelchairs to get to.
Mm-hmm.
So, we want to have the wheelchair folks, close to the entrance, so it's easy for them. So maybe there's a happy medium that they don't have to travel a huge distance. And I don't know if wheelchairs would, go grab compost or not, but they're supposed to have an equal experience to
Yeah, for sure.
able-bodied folks. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Amanda, come on up.
Yeah, I guess I'll weigh in on the raised versus ground beds. So I like the idea of a mixture, like 50-50. The raised beds have the advantage of, even without a wheelchair, it's nice to not have to bend all the way down and crouch on the ground for people of all ages and abilities. So I personally prefer a raised bed, even as a 38-year-old, but I guess 50-50 just sounds like a compromise.
Yep.
And then I wonder maybe the compost, if it was still off to the side, but maybe it could be like halfway down the, like where that
Yeah.
middle bed is or something
Yeah.
like that.
Thank you.
Good suggestions. Sam?
Hi. Going along. Yes. Okay. Going along with the idea of like accessibility, I think that the tool shed maybe being so far from the water, where the hose comes out, might make it difficult not just for people in wheelchairs, but like older folks or people who aren't able to like carry watering cans. Like they'll walk to the tool shed, get their watering cans, walk back to the hose to fill up versus having it next to
Well,
each other? Does that make sense?
You're pointing out something that I neglected to mention. We do have hose bibs throughout the garden.
Gotcha.
So there will be access to water. I don't know, we have to figure out like a 50-foot hose would go the whole distance, so maybe there's two.
Okay. I just like the way I was understanding it was like the only place to like get the water was that bottom left corner. And I was
No,
like,
we have one here, and there's one here.
Cool. I also like the idea of like a central picnic table, because then it feels like everyone has equal
So
claim
you like
to
this?
it.
Yep.
Yeah. But then I agree with what everyone else was saying about like the compost being off to the side and not right next to it.
Gotcha.
I also feel like for the split of raised versus in-ground, I don't know if it's just aesthetic, but it makes sense to me for like the in-ground plots to be around the perimeter and the raised beds to be in the center. So that way it creates like these nice clean lines to like walk through, and then the outer edges can be compartmentalized as necessary as people like request it.
I agree, thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Moving the microphone again. I think also on that front, I'm more also for the split of the in-ground with 50-50. But I would think for me, I think I prefer a 60-65 split, more because I think I know that design has 3 ADA raised beds and 2 raised beds on the second one, but I feel like if we're gonna have more raised beds, I feel like there should be a better number. If there's gonna be like, say, if there's half 50-50 raised beds and the number is, say, 16, then I would feel more comfortable with either a quarter or a third being accessible. I think it's better to have more of that option and have more closer than just having 2 or 3 in a spot.
So,
I don't know what the requirements I don't know what the requirements are for how many you have to have in relation with the ratio,
it's
but.
really, there we go. It's really community to community, what you think would work. There's no code. It's not like parking spaces, you need a certain number of accessible parking spaces for a development. In our experience, we've generally had 2 or 3 of them. But once again, I don't know if you were here when I went through the survey, but like 100%, there were like very few people that wanted to in-ground, and then everybody it seemed like it was really weighted towards the raised beds. I'm comfortable with the 50-50, or you're saying more weighted towards the raised beds?
Yeah, more of, I would
So
say.
60-40, something like that?
Especially if you're going to increase the number with the accessible raised beds
Okay.
to offset it. I agree with the sentiment said earlier.
Okay.
Even someone who's more younger, who has had issues with knees and everything, I think sometimes the raised beds might be less intimidating for people, especially with, you mentioned the soil problem earlier, but I think people just getting into it, I think raised beds might be less intimidating for people, especially if we want to get new people gardening. I think sometimes with in-ground plots, there might be more intimidation with it.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know. Thanks.
Can I just ask for a point of clarification, Ray? Is the main difference between a regular raised bed and an ADA raised bed the height?
No.
Or is there something else in?
No, you have to, for the accessible beds, you have to be able to circulate all the way around you have to provide us accessible route all the way around the garden.
Got it. So there's more space around them?
There's more space. So
Got it.
when you lose some real estate when you put that space in.
I understand.
These are not accessible. They're just long raised beds that you have aisles here, but they could be accessible, I guess, in some, but this area is not accessible because they're connected.
Got it. So you need to be able to get around, you have to have a certain space around all sides.
Right. And,
Got it.
Imagine if somebody was in a wheelchair and they were gardening here, they wanted to get down, they'd have to go all the way,
Yeah, I understand.
you know.
Got it. So basically, the accessible raised beds, you just can't get as many of them per square foot.
Right.
Because you need all the space.
Right.
Yep.
And so putting them together added some efficiency for people who are able-bodied to even crawl up into the, still be like 3 feet high.
Got it.
They wouldn't be like super high like that.
All right, so there were several hands, but I think Priscilla has not spoken yet, so.
Thank you so much. I'll be brief. I will, I'm very excited. I'm not a gardener at all, but I've killed cacti. But in my previous life, I was on the school committee, and I always have my educational hat on, and I see this, especially given where it is and the proximity we have to a food desert in this area, as an educational opportunity, especially for our younger families. And so I will do the controversial thing, even though it is more, the little gardening I do, the comfort of a raised bed is more attractive. I will shed a little bit of support for in-ground, because and feel free to correct me, the educational opportunity for our young children and the accessibility for them to be able to be engaged with the gardening process. And from what I know, the little I know about gardening, an in-ground bed would be beneficial to that. And at that same point, as we're talking about composting, somebody mentioned not completely putting composting off to the side, but so that there's a little bit of an interactive element to that, so that we can also educate our children about composting and sustainability, and just providing opportunities for that. The picnic table in the middle, making this a place that, really a community asset that would be inviting for families. And also, I understand the considerations around the shed from a public safety standpoint. I know that there was 1 or 2 comments about that at one of our last meetings. So I understand and support that. Thank you.
Thanks. To that point, we have done these at schools before, and we've put in windows into the soil, so you can see things growing under the soil and worms and stuff like that. If that's something that we want to add, certainly easily constructed.
Come on up, Allison.
So I wasn't going to say anything or ask questions until we got to the Roosevelt part, because that's where I live. But so my sister's a master gardener in Arkansas, and she works at the Botanical Garden. And they've had really huge success this year putting in a little kids' garden, children's garden, with raised beds that are only 18 inches tall on the sides, which strikes sort of a middle ground. And one of the things, because they raise food there for local food charities, last year I want to say that they produced about 700 pounds, but this year they replaced all their in-ground beds with raised beds, and they're expecting from projections, to get about a ton from the same amount of space and effort. So, but I'm saying that because I was sitting here listening to the discussion about raised beds, ADA compliance, and wheelchairs, but I'm only 52, and I've decided that I can't do in-ground gardening anymore. I've never had a back injury. I just am stiff, and I come home from work in the summer, and I might be a little bit tired from the heat, and my back is sore, and I don't weed. And soon enough, I've abandoned my garden for the year. That's one of the biggest problems for community gardens, is people keeping up with their plots. I think that having things a little bit higher off the ground, maybe a range of different heights, so that you meet the needs of different populations, is probably going to be more sustainable for people coming over from their house and putting in effort over the course of an entire growing season.
So you like this one better?
I do, and I also was looking at the design of the other one, where the plots are right up against the fence, and for anybody to weed in the back, they're going to have to walk across their garden soil, and it's going to compact it and really reduce their productivity and be messy and frustrating, and I was just more positive about the one on the left because of that.
Okay.
And then a further question about compost. Usually people have something like a 3-bin system. And I wondered in this situation whether it might lend itself to something where there are 3 smaller compost areas and they take turns being active. When one's full up, it gets closed until the composting process is over and it's ready to be distributed to gardeners. And so over the course of seasons, access to it is available, more convenient for different people who have different plots. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. Those are great comments.
Come on up. I think we have time for 2 more questions. We're going to have to move on to the other garden. Come on up. Leslie first, and then this other.
Thank you very much. I did go to the community sessions, and people were very passionate about that swing set. So we have to think about how much they really want it. I don't live in that neighborhood, but we have to think about them. I don't think most of them are in the room right now. I like the idea of several different composting areas. And I have a feeling we're going to do some education. I'm a library trustee, and I feel the bookmobile or something might come around. I feel we'll do some education around this, so I'd like to see some language, foreign language, all our languages spoken there, or QR code somewhere as to directions of how we treat the garden, what we're going to do, where the location of things are. So always thinking of multi-language. And also, I know you talked about real estate, but if you can find a place for that on any of the designs. And also, as I spoke about the Nipmuc tribe, all the different, the honoring of the plaques, I'd like to think of where we would want to put those plaques as well to honor the Native Americans. So thank you very much.
So I like the idea of the size of concept B, but kind of streamlining it for ADA on the left from concept A, where we have a lot of like kind of ADA stuff on the left. We can move the compost and the storage shed kind of near each other on the left, so that everything's accessible in kind of like a line. There was a small question of I see that they're all kind of vertically aligned. Is there any possibility of having them horizontally aligned, or is that kind of like a sunlight thing?
No, they could be. They could.
Yeah. So like
no, they could be.
Okay. All good. It was just kind of like fit them into the left side a little more.
The one benefit of having them vertically is the flow for wheelchairs is not blocked by horizontal gardens. So, from a flow perspective, I think this works, from an access better than blocking, going this side to side and you have to kind of fish your way through. But point well taken.
But yeah, just streamlining. Yeah, I think that's all I had.
Okay, thanks for your question.
Mike, can I just add something?
Yep.
Susan Petroni, I'm with the City of Framingham. I just want to stress that any signs that we do would be required to be in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. We require that right now, even at our city beaches.
Yep, okay.
So in the interest of time, we're going to move on to the next garden, but there is going to be a mandatory questionnaire at the end with a lot of open space where you guys can share other thoughts, and there's going to be an email address where you guys can share further thoughts as well. But just so we give enough time to both gardens, we're going to move on to Roosevelt at this point.
Okay, this is so quick and I'm going to have to go.
Okay.
It's not really germane to one part or the other. But, we always hear about deer being a nuisance, right? Have you heard of anywhere where they were able to provide like deterrent that deer would eat, like the kind of food they would eat, that would keep them away from the gardens?
That's an
Has anyone ever done something like
interesting idea.
There's some plants that they don't like. But
I know my father would never care about that. He's from a farm.
Okay.
Bambi, right?
Okay. Ready to move on, Ray?
Okay.
Excellent. And there will be more Q&A for the next set of gardens that we're about to see.
Yep. Thanks. So this is Roosevelt Park, bordered by Fay Road and Seminole Avenue. We did, I'm not going to go back to the site analysis, but we identified in our site analysis 2 potential locations for the garden, here to the west and here to the east. And the overall, wasn't consensus, but the overall percentage of votes were for this side of the site. There were some concerns with the sledding hill. However, we tried to get it away from the hill as much as we could in our designs. This is one of the schemes, concept A, and I'll get a little bit closer. So our entrance is off of Seminole Avenue here. We create a new accessible pathway with an area for a paved delivery where a pickup truck could park and supplies could be brought into the garden. This is an existing asphalt path that's in the park already. We have some shade trees along the avenue that we'd have to kind of thread the needle with. Here's the garden here. It's about 58 feet square, plus or minus. As we develop this, the dimensions will become a little bit more clear. But I would like to highlight the elements of this garden. We are dealing with a site that has a slight slope, so we're going to need a retaining wall to retain the garden and make it maintain its accessibility. This particular scheme has 12 in-ground plots that can change if they're divided up into half. But we're also showing 12 raised beds, 4x8 raised beds in the center. We have accessible surfacing all throughout the garden. The compost area is fully accessible, and in the back corner, tool shed, storage shed located along the western edge with rain barrels, which can be used for watering, an ADA picnic table, once again, our backflow preventer with a water line to Seminole. We heard at our last meeting that a positive thing might be to have some kind of pollinators to edge the garden with. So we're showing some pollinators at the entrance, information sign from folks coming in. And I think that's it for this one. Concept design B is also in the same location, different shape, different experience. Once again, an accessible path to the existing path that's there right now. This actually is mislabeled. The new water line would be here. This is the existing water line, steel picket fence surrounding, and once again, some type of retaining wall to level out the surface. This one is about the same size, 56 by 58. They're very similar in size. We didn't want to make this too large to present any too much intrusion into the sledding hill, but also wanted to provide adequate garden space. And to blow up here, the pollinator garden is actually inside of the wall. New water line, information sign here. We have pretty large plots, 9 by 8 in-ground, 6 by 8 in-ground here, and 8 by 10s along the outside edge, yielding about 14 in-ground plots, 3 raised beds. And once again, we can discuss the quantity of raised beds. We can go 50-50 if that's desirable. The tool shed's over here, rain barrel. We do have, once again, I forgot to mention, we have a couple of hose bibs in here for watering the gardens. Picnic table more centrally located. And this we thought could be like a flower garden or something like that to kind of make this an enjoyable space for folks picnicking. There was also discussion about this Bethany property, which was recently purchased by the city. You can see here is Roosevelt Park. This is this large property here. That can be part of a future study. Our CPA grant is really focused on Roosevelt and Bates Road Park, but there may be opportunity to have additional garden space in the future in this large plot, and that would all have to be worked out. I think it's owned by the school department right now, so that would be a discussion for a later time. And in keeping with the last part, we'll open the floor for comments on these two concepts, and let us know what you think.
If anybody else knows they have a question, just come on up and we can get a little line going.
So I love the combination with the pollinator garden. That's awesome, and I love the round thing for design. I think it looks very pleasing to me. The thing with you have a bunch of in-ground plots. The thing with the in-ground plots, in general, you raise more food with in-ground because you have more space. The problem is when it gets longer than 4 inches, if it's wider than your hand, you cannot reach it. So these in-ground plots, they would all have people would step on it. And it's really hard to give people plots when they're not really marked. I don't know, this is plus or minus, I don't know exactly.
So this might be the solution to add some like paver stones in the middle.
Yeah, but you have to have more paver stones because you have to cut it in the other side too.
Yeah, it could go this way
across.
too.
Yes, exactly.
And we can add them.
Exactly. That's a little tricky. You get in general you get more food out of it because you have more growing space. But to market for different people, it could be a family or people who garden together. But it's a little tricky with telling people which plot is which. But I really love this thing with the pollinators and the round design. It's awesome.
Great, thank you.
I must agree with the round design. I like that it's incorporated with the path of the hill, especially since it's so close to the entrance on that side. So I would probably prefer it on the curved side with the B. However, as I said before, I am more a fan with raised plots, especially with new people getting in. But I also, it's very much a mix because I also like that there's that central space with the garden. I don't know how that would be done since a lot of where the raised plots are on design A are in that central space.
One of the solutions may be to expand these a little bit in size to get everything in.
I know you also have to do with the hill. I also wanted to ask, I know you have the stone fortified wall regarding it since it's on the hill. Do you know estimate about how high do you think that stone fortified wall would be? Okay.
All right, so the curve is cute, right, design-wise, that's cute. But it looks like, do we get more pollinator garden the other way?
Possibly, yeah.
Are they the same size? Because that one looks bigger. A looks bigger.
This is 58 by 58. I think the problem is that they're zoomed in differently.
Okay.
It's been a problem that we've had with the PowerPoint.
Oh, that's
but
fine then.
they're basically the same size.
So the curve is very cute design. But I think it's been established that the raised beds could raise even more food, and we see the advantages of the raised beds, right? So that would be, I think it would be better to have more raised beds, even more than 50-50. I think maybe the 60-40, 65-35 split, or no, maybe I like that you've got 2 rain barrels though over there, so I think 2 rain barrels is good. The garden in the middle is cute, but again, I think the raised beds is the critical aspect to it, but the curve is the cute design. That's all
I just had an issue in terms of lighting and security. Some people might want to be working later in the evening. They come home from work. They don't really have an opportunity to have a daytime or on the weekend only is there any lighting and then security? Will it be locked at a certain time at night? Is it open to the public?
We're not showing any new lighting in these. I don't know if there's lighting along Seminole Avenue. No?
I don't either.
Is there some on Seminole?
Some on it, but it's also on the street lamps are on the other side, on the sidewalk side.
Yeah. So I don't think this,
I don't think they'll illuminate the garden.
I don't think this park is illuminated,
That's
which,
what I was shaking my head.
which would be a big expense to bring in a,
Dark as the black of night.
yeah.
One of the things that I really liked about the Bates B option was that there was intentional thinking about expansion. So I'm wondering about that with Roosevelt. Are we at capacity? Is there room to expand without over the river, through the woods to the school area? If we put that aside for a minute, within the park, is there options for expansion? And just an aside, I wish for a plan that includes the expansion at Bates, so we could see what is the possibility. I'm sort of a go big or go home person.
Yep.
Maybe we don't get the whole thing, but maybe we start with the smaller part, but we know where we're headed.
Okay, that's a good point. This one's a little more tricky because we have active use of the hillside and also a lot more topography. So I think we could have something climbing up the hill, but it would almost feel like two gardens, like two entrances to get in there. But we'll talk amongst the committee to see. I think we should think about that for this particular one, but it won't be part of the cost estimate. It would be just, is it feasible or not? Yes, sir.
I like the idea of the pollinator garden. I think we should incorporate that in Bates as well. I do like the in-ground plots, like curved, but I like the point that was made about like stepping on to be able to weed, and I think that should be considered for any of the plots, is that they need to be accessible just to be able to be weeded, ease of use, and that's about it.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you again. I would like to see a pollinator garden on Bates as well. And again, the languages, always showing that we're telling people what to do in several languages, and also to have one of the, to honor the land for the Native Americans as well. So thank you for this. I don't know if we have to think about the parents again. A lot of the parents were very concerned about having that sled. I remember when my kids were little, that is important. So just like the swing set from Bates, I hope whatever we do, we keep that spot open so families can have their children enjoy that, okay?
Yeah, that's why we're trying to
Thank you.
not expand that, yeah.
Other questions, other ideas that people want to share? Come on up. Anyone that's interested, come on up.
So I wasn't sure if it was intentional, but for concept A, it feels like it's a little bit to the left of like where concept B is, because the curve kind of keeps going on concept B.
Oh, yeah, if you like the curve,
yeah.
we can do the final scheme with the curve, not a problem.
Because I like concept A's, like the left side of it, where it's kind of like accessible, everything's kind of close to the front of the park, like we talked about with the other one.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be nice if we kept the curve going, just to add some visual flair or something.
Mm-hmm.
I also like the idea of the centralized kind of like communal hangout with a kind of like just an aesthetic garden. In concept A, the picnic table feels like kind of a bit of an afterthought,
Mm-hmm.
but I think in person it might be better. But yeah.
Thank you.
So in regards to potential expansion, it seems like option design B is closer to the pathway, so there might be more space to expand to the left. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Well, that's an interesting idea. Like
because
maybe,
like you're starting that
maybe over here.
58-foot closer to this end of the park. And so if you were going to expand that way, you would already be a few feet further from the sledding area.
Yeah, I would think if we expand this way.
That, yeah, instead of going into the hill.
There are
this
some big,
direction.
it would be nice to garden in here, but there's some big trees in
The
there.
trees are already there, yeah. The other thing is that in one design, the pollinator garden's on the outside of the fence, and on the other, it's on the inside. It just makes more sense to me that it would be on the outside of the fence, because it would be easier to contain it from spreading into people's plots.
Right.
And also, who would be in charge of, I know you don't have this answer, but, or maybe you do, like who's in charge of
That's something.
creating the pollinator garden and maintaining it, and is that a paid position, and is that?
That's, like, I don't think we want to put it on the Parks Department to maintain the pollinator
I don't think we do either. I don't think that's going to sell very well.
So that's why the benefit of having it inside, we thought the gardeners would take care of it.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's really easy for all of us to say until we're the ones that have the plot there and have an extra like 20 feet of garden to deal with. But that's not me against it. I just like think it's valid to bring up.
Well, I mean, this could be a pollinator garden right here, small area.
Yeah, well, one thing that was brought up at this location was like all the hijinks that the children do and whatnot, and like, I don't know, potential vandalism or whatever. I don't know, I live here, like, I don't think the kids would, whatever. But I do think that a pollinator garden between the walkway and the fence and then another garden is a good deterrent. As a kid who used to jump fences, like, I'm less likely to walk through flowers. I am like, there's a fence here. I don't even care what's on the other side. I just want to see if I could get to the other. It's like garden, fence, garden is a really good deterrent.
Yep.
Without being like, oh, we need jail length, height fences.
I'm ashamed to admit it. I'm old enough to remember we used to plant barberry, which is an invasive, illegal plant now, to keep people out of stuff.
Yeah.
Because they wouldn't go through barberry.
Yeah, holly. Well,
But it hurts.
Right. So, yeah, and then I pretty much agree with what everyone else was saying about the split up of in-ground versus raised gardens, and also keeping in mind the need for separation for that like nice curve.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think Allison has some comments that she's going to share from somebody that couldn't be here today. So if anybody else has comments, you can come after her.
Okay, so I'm actually, speaking for a neighbor of Roosevelt who was at the first meeting. She couldn't make it today, but we've exchanged several emails. I spoke with her on the phone yesterday. And so I told her that I could share her comments at the meeting and see what you guys think as well. So she said that she was, like I said, she was at the neighborhood meeting in March. She was initially in support of the idea of a community garden at Roosevelt. She likes community gardens in general. But after she went home and she thought it through and thought about the uses of the park, she did have some concerns about whether Roosevelt was the right location. And here are her main reasons for that. Her concerns were, number one, about open space. We've talked about the kids with the sledding and playing soccer, but also she spoke of just for the neighborhood, keeping kind of more empty, undeveloped space instead of trying to fill up all the green space with other stuff. And so she thought that was important. She also spoke about parking. She's an immediate abutter of Roosevelt Park and said that parking along or traveling in cars along those residential streets around the park is very tight already, and they're already having issues with emergency vehicles having access. So she was concerned about the impact of bringing any additional parking in that area without some plan for accommodating it. And then her final concern was just related to some of the amenities and what the impact of things like a shed or a compost system might have for the neighbors and for the other users of the park. So again, I told her I would pass that along, and I think we'd be definitely interested if anybody has any thoughts on those comments. I wish she was here to be able to have a dialogue about it, but since she's not, if anybody wants to respond to any of those things, we'd love to hear what other people think as well about those issues. Susan, Mary.
Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, actually, I was just listening to that as a community gardener myself. I do feel like if we, and I also feel like we'd had feedback from the community about this interest in raised beds. That's mostly going to attract people from the neighborhood. So I can see if you need to come in and garden in a raised bed, you could walk. You might occasionally have to drive over, but it would be infrequent, right? And again, in the plots that I work at the garden, we have, I think, like 25 plots. On any given day, there's usually one car. And then, again, for the children, I've seen beautiful examples of where community gardens actually become places where the kids come and learn about gardening, and that there's a lot of initiatives already, there's initiatives in Framingham already happening around that, and this would give them other places where that could happen, right? There's beautiful kids garden at the Pelham Community Center and at the 2 Hoops and Homeworks, and we have a lovely gardener working with them. This would give her another place to do that. So as long as there's still room for the sleds to come down the hill, then in the summer they could also do gardening. So I see lots of benefits, and I don't see this, from looking at the size of the community garden I work with, having much impact on parking. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other thoughts? Susan and then Carrie.
Susan, I'm speaking for myself. This is my neighborhood. I've lived here for 24 years. I see the same thing. I don't see it as a parking issue. There are 14 buses that stop at that park for the neighborhood, for the bus stop. There are probably 200 kids that go through that park. And I really see this as a family-oriented community garden where people would walk. They'd bring their kids with their little wagons up and do gardening and go back. I don't see a lot of cars actually parking there. I think many of us, like Michael and Samala, we all live in this neighborhood. We would all walk. We probably wouldn't take our cars.
Okay. Thank you.
Along the same lines, I live in the neighborhood where the existing community garden is and walk by that community garden all the time and do not see an addition to traffic issues or parking issues in the neighborhood. So I think that might be a concern and something to think about around this garden, but I'm not sure that in reality it's going to be much of a problem. So,
thank you.
Yeah, I'll repeat the question.
What happens when the town starts to spray with mosquitoes? I prefer the first plan on Bates that gets pushed back so that that spray doesn't land on all the plants and then someone's going to ingest them. I don't know what the material is that they use to spray the mosquitoes, but everyone's running and shutting their windows at that time, sometime in July.
Okay, so the question was around the annual mosquito spraying that the city of Framingham does and the proximity to the roadside and the impact that that might have. So this is probably news to Ray because he doesn't live in Framingham, but they do annual spraying and probably in your community as well.
Yeah.
So is that thought or concern as it relates to proximity to the roadside where the spraying occurs?
I would have to get back to you. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, I haven't thought about it. That's a great question, though.
That's why I think pushing it back is probably a better move. And I know some people don't want the swing set, but the older children use the swing set in front, and the children in carriages go way down the end of the street with their parents. It's more of a, I would say, age 9 to up that's using the swing set right now, and it's used every day.
Got it. So just to repeat the thought there for the camera, she had pointed out that the swing set is still used actively on a daily basis by the older kids. So consideration for that as well, which we already knew. Other thoughts or questions as it relates to Roosevelt? No? Okay. Go ahead. Come on up.
Well, for any park, I guess I was thinking about green space and open space. And so to me, putting a vegetable garden in a park isn't taking away green open space. I think it's making a more, especially if we're talking about kids learning about gardening and food deserts and all these things. It makes it an interactive educational space for a green space, that just having turf grass, that's a constructed space as well, that someone at one point made a choice to use the green space that way. So I would say that this is still green open space.
Yeah, we can all clap for that. I tend to agree. I think that it's not like we're taking away for development purposes. We're not putting like an industrial warehouse here that's going to take away space for kids. So I wanted to say basically the same thing myself, that, you know, Roosevelt's a pretty decent sized park, and through what we learned in the first meetings from folks that live adjacent to the park is that the other side of the park was more used for soccer and other things, and there was a desire to not take up that space. I do live relatively close to the park. I have seen children playing in this space before, but certainly not as much as the play structure or the other space that's closer to Fay Road. So I don't think we're really losing out here. I do think the one thing that this is going to affect is the sledding hill, because I think in both of these designs it is the run out from the sledding hill. So I do think that like there is an impact to that situation, but I also am pretty sure that we live in a climate change world and we don't have nearly as much snow as we once did. So I wouldn't want to necessarily like not do something that's beneficial for 5 or 6 months of the year for maybe 1 or 2 sledding days a year, personally. And there's also other sledding opportunities not too far away from this. So that was my thoughts. Any other thoughts? Come on up.
I think on the climate change note, you know, Roosevelt Park is so important, not only for the fact of it being an open green space, but it has so much green and trees to it. It really makes it so Roosevelt in our neighborhood is less of an urban heat island. It's not as hot. There are many people hanging out in the summer or going under the shade. So obviously there will be the green spaces with the bends, but when you're building with the accessible or the tool shed, I think it's also important to keep in mind materials that are good at not taking in the sun's rays, especially if people are going to be there in June and July and August, when, as we know, we've been getting 99, 98 degree days, heat waves. If you're coming home from a long day, you would want to use, hopefully, things when you're designing the concept that are not as absorbing of heat, because not only does that mean that the plants are absorbing a lot of heat, which could also be dangerous for around it, but the ground is taking in as a lot, and it's not as fun when you go down the next day and you realize that that 95 degree day you had is still there in the soil, and you still have to do it with either the tool shed or anything. And I think that's also a thing to consider, possibly, I know, with the other park with the metal fence, because that's also a thing to factor in as well, because when it gets to June and July, you bump up against that, and that could get really hot very fast.
Point. Thank you. Good point.
Thank you. I am not in a butter. I'm not in that neighborhood. I'm a little couple blocks down, but I do want to voice support for the few speakers. I do understand the concerns about reutilization of open space, especially because in the south side there's so few of it compared to other parts of town. So I totally understand the apprehension. However, I do see this as repurposing and continuing open space instead of just doing away with it. Like another speaker said, it's not like we're putting like a warehouse or, you know, God, not an apartment, not another apartment on this space. So it's just reutilization. And I just also want to echo Samala's point about being creative and engaging the youth. And I say this as I don't know how familiar everybody is with more like the D9 portion of the south side, but I grew up on Weld Street, and I got to visit the National Lancers near Merchant Field as a legislator last year, while they were complaining about the kids from Weld Street that constantly break into their facilities. And I had to fess up that a couple decades ago I was one of those kids. So I totally understand that kids will be kids. But being creative and engaging with them, I think I'm cautiously optimistic that there is a way to do that, in that, you know, yes, we will have kids sledding in the winter and possibly, hopefully, gardening and learning in the summer. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Come on up. And while Allison's walking up, is there anyone else that wants to come in after her? All right. So we're going to have a questionnaire shortly after this, so be ready to give the rest of your thoughts there.
I just wanted to say sledding is a hot button issue for my family, and you can get on some of the really good sledding runs without going into the area where the garden is. So there are always some that point off that direction, but the faster ones actually go a little bit south of this spot. So
That's good.
So you're saying, just to confirm, you're saying that like there is ways to sled to the, you said south, but it would be like the downside here?
Like it's almost parallel to the, yes, that and.
That's the primary sledding track?
Well, that's where you go faster.
Got it.
Yeah. This is where you go slower because the land sort of evens out. It might be smart to do, if there's going to be regrading, just something that sort of.
Like a little berm?
A little berm.
To kind of shoot the kids?
To keep people from accidentally.
That's a good idea.
running into the fence.
Perfect.
Especially if it's going to be also a wall on that piece.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that somebody that has recent sledding experience has confirmed that. Other thoughts? It looks like Mary's handing out the questionnaires. On one side of the questionnaire is Bates, and the other side is Roosevelt. It's very short. It's just 3 questions. And the open-ended question gives you a chance to kind of elaborate. Oh, sorry. Well, then come on up.
Are we done?
I think so.
Is that it?
Yep, that's it for me.
Okay.
And if we're done soon enough, we can go to the DFI celebration.
We still have time. Did we want to have like any final Q&A? Just if anybody had any? No? Okay, so we're gonna just wrap it up and move on. Okay, I'm just gonna say a couple of things to wrap up today. So I'm Allison, I'm one of the organizers for this project. Thank you guys for coming and sharing your feedback. We've heard a ton of great stuff. I'm sure you still have more you could tell us, and we want to know that too. Just a couple of reminders first. If you go home after this meeting and think of other things you wish you told us, we definitely still want that feedback. So you should have a Framingham Community Gardens @gmail email address that you guys have all been getting emails from. You can email that email address. You can also email me personally. But please send us kind of your lingering thoughts that kind of come up after you've had time to digest all of this information. Also, we're gonna have a video recording of the meeting. It's gonna be posted as soon as it's available. Thank you, Access Framingham. And so that'll be posted along with an online form where you can provide your feedback. And so definitely, if you have friends and neighbors who wanted to come but couldn't make it today, you can help us spread that video out to the people who should see this meeting. We'll send the link out to all of you guys to help us share it as soon as it's available. And then finally, the questionnaire. You guys look like you are all writing rapidly. That's great. So there's a big question field where you can write anything that you think is important from the meeting today or the last meeting, your pros, your concerns, unanswered questions. You tell us what you think from all of this information is most important for us to take forward into figuring out our next steps. And there's this place also at the bottom for contact information. If you didn't sign in today, you can give us your contact information there on your way out. Thank you all. I'll let you write, answer your questions. Thanks.